The phenomenon of complex television is relatively new. Only a few scholars have tried to define the newly emerged developments within the academic framework of television and film studies. In fact, Jason Mittel is the first scholar to be published with work on contemporary television storytelling. Together with the draft version of his book, The Poetics of Contemporary Television Storytelling, as well as Markus Kuhn's Filmnarratologie, Ein Erzähltheoretisches Analysemodell, this essay will offer an in-depth analysis of the function of the narrative, especially in the off-space of the story world, and its relation to the show's viewers.
Robert Baratheon, black of hair. Joffrey Baratheon, golden head.
Separate from, but along the same lines, as Jason Mittel's narrative theory in terms of television, Markus Kuhn applies narrative theories of literature to film. It is crucial here to first outline the concept of analepsis and prolapsis within literature before looking at film and ultimately a television series. Mieke Barth outlines narrative tools in literary theory with a sequential ordering of the narrative, more particularly the notion of anachrony. Anachrony can be used as a means for the realization of specific literary effects, she says. She continues by discussing, quote, 3 aspects of chronological deviation: direction, distance, and span, unquote. Markus Kuhn uses the exact same narrative concept of internal and external versions of anachrony, with only minor variations in terminology. He does mention the distance of an anachrony as Reichweite and the span as Umfang of an anachrony. His internal analepsis can either be heterodiegetisch, or in English heterodiegetic, meaning that the analepsis refers to other events happening within the narrative time span, and can be homodiegetisch, or in English homodiegetic, meaning that the analepsis refers to some of the same events covered in the narrative. He also divides the internal homodiegetic analepsis into repetitive analepsen, that is repetitive analepsis, and completive analepsen, or completing analepsis, meaning that previously missing information is provided to fill in previous narrative gaps or ellipses.
Frick, Mr. President. Linda?
Linda and I have talked it over, and I think she's right on this.
Tell Bob he can come by tomorrow afternoon.
Sir, respectfully, I do not...
While scholars use complex and exhausting means of arriving at the term of a completing or repetitive internal homodiegetic analepsis, it would be much more convenient to term this concept the narrative off. Just like the enchant, the narrative off is simply information that is missing, repeated, or hinted at through visual cues in television series in order to reward consistent viewers and encourage intermittent viewers to re-watch earlier episodes. It is a form of a formal system based on contextual clues that may incite fandom and thus create a larger fan base. A show that uses the narrative off will be much more enjoyable and interactive for a consistent viewer, who may even punish intermittent viewers by withholding information that is only revealed or discovered through consistent spectatorship.
All right, Frank, show me what you can do.
Thank you, Mr. President. That was her trying to take credit for my idea, advice she wouldn't take from me. Unacceptable. I will not allow her to sell my goods when she cuts me out of the profits. David Rasmussen is the majority.
Some TV shows, such as House of Cards, actually break the fourth wall in order to convey the narrative off to the audience. Watch closely.
Let's see if he stays with the herd or joins the pack. David, you mind if I join you?
Please. I'm a discreet man. You're lucky for that. I'm not going to mention this to Bob, but if you ever bring it up again, I won't have a choice.
Looks like he opted for the herd.
David's on board with this?
It was his idea.
Then why isn't he here?
Well, we have to be careful until it's a done deal.
This is the sort of thing that there's no turning back.
I can throw a cherry on top.
How?
You don't want to know how. You just want the headline when you keep 3,000 jobs in your district.
I'll get you 10, probably 11.
It's so refreshing to work with someone who will throw a saddle on a gift horse rather than look it in the mouth.
I've had 3 members of the Black Caucus tell me they're backing my play for the speakership.
Interesting.
I have a sense you've been disseminating some misinformation.
No, I'm afraid it's...
The visual cues that leave the on-screen frame into the off often have a double function. They're not only a visual cue that triggers awareness with the viewer, they often also serve as part of a bigger narrative off that's important for a story beyond the visual clue. An example of this complex relation between visual cues, the visual off, and the narrative off can be found in the show Once Upon a Time. Once Upon a Time uses a very complex web of characters, which plays upon the ability of the returning viewer to connect the characters from a fairy tale world to the characters in what is the supposed real-life situation. Because of the two different worlds in which the characters are placed, as well as the different relationships amongst the characters in the different worlds, the show constantly uses the concrete and imaginary, as well as the concept of the internal and external off. The internal off is a web of knowledge only known to the characters in the show and unclear for the viewer, whereas the external off is a web of knowledge that the viewers, and sometimes some characters, are aware of. The following clip is placed as a flashback in the mid-season finale of Season 3 of Once Upon a Time and shows Henry and Mary Margaret. The clip is set in the real world at a point in time when Mary Margaret is Henry's teacher. Henry is adopted and has no clue who his real family is. Throughout the previous seasons, the viewer has found out that Henry was adopted by an evil witch who created the town of Storybrooke to keep all the fairy tale characters hostage without them knowing. They developed alternate personalities and have, at the time of this clip, no clue who they really are. But the consistent viewer already knows that Mary Margaret is Henry's grandmother. At the start of the clip, we see that Henry has an empty family tree. This is a visual clue supported by the concrete narrative of the storyline of Henry discovering who his family is, namely Mary Margaret being his grandmother. But at this point in time, he's not aware of that yet. He puts the family tree away into concrete off. As Mary Margaret approaches and asks about the homework, the viewers will most likely have made the connection between Harry not knowing his roots and the irony of Mary Margaret actually being family. Then, Henry tells his teacher that he thinks he doesn't belong. The viewer knows this is true since all the characters actually belong in the fairy tale world. Then, Henry's given a book of fairy tales, which was the trigger for all narrative stories in the pilot episode of Season 1. The talk about magic and it not being real is yet another pointer to the concrete narrative off, as the book is a pointer, a visual clue to the key of Henry's words. As we see the close-up of a man and a woman on what seems their wedding day, the consistent viewer knows that this is a picture of Mary Margaret, or Snow White, in the fairy tale world. This effect is enhanced when we see Mary Margaret in her white dress. Then we see the picture of what we know is Snow White holding a baby. The viewer now knows through the concrete narrative off that this is Henry's mother, Emma. It may be clear now that following a complex television show constantly triggers your brain and forces you to think actively about the narrative material. Shows, such as Once Upon a Time or Lost even, require an audience to really follow the narrative. There's no place for what Jason Mittel calls intermittent viewers. The complex television uses a lot of serial elements such as ongoing relationships between characters or a story event that is stretched over multiple episodes. Many of them are understandable when these occasional viewers try to follow the story. In a series, as Once Upon a Time, an intermittent viewer will miss many of these visual and narrative cues we just discussed. They may be able to understand what the scene is about, but they will not be interpolated. In other words, they will most probably decode the encoded message in a very different way than consistent viewers. A great example of this interpolation to the narrative off can be found in Showtime's The L Word. After recapping the relevant events that happened in previous episodes, or in other words, bringing the narrative off to the attention of the constant viewer while explaining the storyline for the intermittent viewers, it goes on to show a scene that seems out of place and not necessarily relevant for the ongoing narrative. However, as the first season progresses and one gets to understand the way the narrative storylines and relationships within the show work, the constant viewer understands the scene that is shown in the beginning tells something about the history of a character, somebody that interacts with the character, or sometimes even a story that is indirectly referred to in the episode itself. The function of this scene is thus revealed to the viewer through the episode or a couple of episodes, because the relation of the scene to the bigger overarching storyline is different every episode. The viewer never knows where or with whom the explanation lies. In order to understand this narrative and the way it connects with the rest of the storylines, one would have to follow the show. Those who do not follow the show can understand and follow the storylines, but will not decode this information. The show takes it even a step further in Season 3, where it introduces a random scene in the beginning of the first episode, briefly showing some characters only to create a web of relations. Quite literally, since the central theme in the show is a chart of who hooked up with whom. These relations are revealed throughout the season, all in these random scenes set in the past. Finally, leading up to the season finale, where a seemingly random character, the wedding minister of two of the main characters, turns out to be the girl shown in this first episode.
I'm Marilyn.
This clip from Game of Thrones refers to a concrete narrative arc that has already been placed somewhere in this video. Can you recall what it was?
What do I want from him? He's my father. Do I need to want something? Why do you care what I want from him?
Because you slandered me to father before.
It's not slander if it's true.
And what's this truth you plan on telling him today?
Why are you so nervous about what I'm going to say to father?
Because you're a liar. I expect you'll tell lies about me, about Joffrey.
Any lies in particular?
You're a clever man. But you're not half as clever as you think you are.
Still makes me more clever than you.